So my name's Anna Morrison, Marketing Manager here at DeepCrawl, and I'll be your host for today. If you want to tweet during the presentation, then just use the hashtag crawlchat. There we go. Right, so now we're on our way. Please do join the conversation using the hashtag crawlchat. We also have our Global Account Manager, Kit Nichols, with us, who's on hand for any DeepCrawl related technical questions if necessary. And our very special guest today is Jacqueline Urick, Manager of SEO for Sears PartsDirect. Hi, Jacqueline.
Hi, how are you, Anna?
Good, thank you. So just to introduce you, Sears PartsDirect is a Chicago-based repair parts and accessories retailer. And your website has over 12 million index pages, so you can imagine that taking care of your SEO is no mean feat. Recognized as a woman in business, woman to watch by the Minneapolis-St. Paul Business Journal, Jacqueline is a veteran internet marketer with expertise in B2B and B2C search engine optimization, search engine marketing, and analytics. Prior to being an in-house e-commerce marketer, she provided online marketing consultancy to some of the largest law firms in the world and notable global corporations such as American Express and 3M. When she's not combing over spreadsheets and reports, she serves on the board of the Racine Urban Garden Network and works on her tiny 560 square foot house and enjoys video games. You might have recently seen Jacqueline's case study on our website, and if you haven't had a chance to read it yet, you can find it at deepcrawl.com/case studies. So thanks for being here today and for kindly agreeing to share your top 5 tips for a successful SEO audit. So Jacqueline, over to you.
All right, thank you so much for that very warm introduction, Anna. I am the presenter, right?
I can see your screen now.
There I am. I am now. Right. There we go. Okay. Let's do this, and there we go. All right. So thank you to DeepCrawl for hosting this webinar today, and thank you to everyone on the call taking your time out of your busy schedules to listen to this. And when DeepCrawl asked me to host this webinar, I was both honored and stumped. How do I choose only 5 tips? But my hope is that you walk away with a few new insights and actionable tips for the websites that you steward. And so for me, technical SEO is all about the flow. The first step.
Sorry, just to interrupt you a second. I'm not sure if people can see your presentation. Can you just check that you're in presenter mode?
There we go. Now do you see it?
Perfect. There we go. Now we can see it.
It helps if you hit play.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, so make it full screen as well.
It is full screen.
There we are then, or presentation mode.
Is it tiny on your screen?
Yeah, yeah, it's quite small. If you could just put it into presentation mode, which should be
is it this?
In the bottom left corner, I think.
In
the bottom left.
Sure that here's the slideshow. Is this the right one?
Yeah, got it. Perfect. Brilliant.
Okay. I see what happened. My apologies. Technical difficulties. All right. Okay. So for me, technical SEO is all about the flow. The first step in site diagnosis is understanding how bots really move through your site and process the content on it. So let's say I asked you to map out your site for me. I suspect many of you would draw a hierarchy similar to this. And this is a hierarchy where most of the incoming equity arrives on the homepage and elegantly cascades down to each level below it. And I don't know if you've ever had the privilege of witnessing the chocolate fountain in the Bellagio in Las Vegas. I mean, it is truly a majesty. Chocolate flows elegantly down the fountain. There's nothing external acting upon it outside of, gravity. And this is kind of how most of us visualize our site equity flow. It's elegant and controlled, and I know for certain that our user experience folks especially want us to believe that this is true. But these chocolate fountains are much closer to the reality of what your site equity flow really is. In the first photo, we have equity literally blown off of the site. It's just kind of scattered to the wind. In the middle photo, the equity flow is lopsided, with a fourth of the site receiving the lion's share of equity. In the last photo, the flow has seized completely. It's just a globby mess, and bots probably have no idea how to navigate this. So if I asked you again to draw your site hierarchy, this is probably closer to what it really is. You have equity coming in on different levels of the site. You have equity going out in different places. You might have orphans, pages forgotten from long ago, stale content, crawl creepers that might be duplicating content, errors that might be blocking flow. And there's a lot going on, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but the key is to understand your site's unique ecosystem so that you can determine the best SEO strategy for your site. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So it's all about knowing your flow and establishing a baseline by auditing your site. So by understanding all of the parts of your site and knowing which of those parts are indexed, by analyzing your crawl budget, by auditing your sitemaps, by analyzing crawl errors, and being prepared for new bot innovations like JavaScript crawling, you might have a more nuanced understanding of your site's unique flow. And when you know that flow, you can then understand how new features, content, initiatives, all the balls in motion happening on a large site may change it for good or for ill. So let's jump in. Tip number one, knowing what's in the index. When you have a small site, it's pretty easy to know and control what's in the index. When you have tens of thousands or millions of pages in the index, truly knowing what's in there is a huge challenge. So our first step is to list out all of your page templates on a piece of paper or in Evernote or whatever you want to do it in. But list out all of them, and that includes like all the links in the footer that you forget about, like privacy policy and terms of service, that weird out-of-date sitemap that you've got laying around on your page for whatever reason, those microsites a vendor made for you like a decade ago, the rogue foreign language blog your German division decided to set up in a directory in a different CMS and then stopped updating it, all of that stuff. So we need to be aware of all of these things because more likely than not, Google hasn't forgotten about all of these other pages. They know about all of these pages on your site, and they impact our flow. So step two, determine which of these templates are the most important for your business. Is it your product pages? Is it your staff bios? Is it white papers? Is it blog content, etc.? If you aren't sure what the most important pages on your site are from a business perspective, it may be interfacing with your finance team, your marketing team, and or your analytics teams, and find out what parts of the site are really driving the business and which parts are strategically important for the future of the business. So now that you've got that list of pages, now it's time to find out how many pages Google thinks they are keeping tabs on, and of course Bing also has a feature where you can find out in Bing Webmaster Tools how many pages you have in the index. And you may see a big number in there and think, man, I've nailed it. I've got all these pages in the index. It's awesome. But over-indexation can point to a flow issue just like under-indexation can. So Now we use our mad SEO Google Foo skills and figure out how many pages of our strategically important templates are in the index. So here, you can use site colon commands. There's a couple reference URLs at the very bottom of the slide if you'd like to brush up on your search engine operators. But what you're looking for is how many results are returned. And then you determine what the gaps and or potential issues are. So in this example, for this particular template, I was expecting about 4,000 pages because that's how many I've been keeping track of. But there's really 30,000 of them in the index. So why is there a difference? And that is because some of these pages are paginated. So one of the action items I may take away from this exercise is to inspect these pages to make sure the pagination is handled properly, or maybe determine a strategy to either, do the pages need to be paginated? Maybe we can get all of the content that we need on a single page, or maybe these pages need to be split up into like different types of content. But those are educated decisions I can make after I've done this analysis. All right. Now it's time to do some math. So do all these numbers add up? If you've got a lot of unaccounted for pages after you've gone through this exercise and figured out how many of each template is in the index, you're probably over-indexed and there may be some flow issues. The same if you're expecting a lot more pages of your key templates to be in the index and they're not, then you're under-indexed, and then you have a flow issue there as well. Which leads to crawl budget analysis. So crawl budget is the number of pages that a search engine allocates to crawl per day. I know Google defines it as based on domain authority. Higher domain authority means more pages would be crawled per day, but site speed also plays a factor in your site's crawl budget. And why this is important is you need an idea of how often and how much your content is crawled daily, because if the budget is much less than that number of pages that are important to your business, it can help shape the strategy for bots to those important pages that you've identified in the previous step. And knowing this can help you estimate things for management as well. So if you know that your crawl budget is X pages, and you're about to release an enhancement that impacts 10x pages, you know that it'll take no less than 10 days for all of those pages to be crawled. In fact, you know it's going to take a lot longer than 10 days. So you can get an idea of, what your site's crawl budget is from the Google Search Console. So here's some different examples of crawl budgets, and I put these two small sites in here to make a point, because even when a site is very small, it's not crawled in whole every day, even though it would be very easy for Google to do so. The site on the bottom has a higher domain authority and gets twice as many pages crawled on it, even though there are not twice as many pages on that site as there are on the one above. And then here we have an example of a medium-sized site with less than 1 million pages on the top, and then a large site with millions of pages on the bottom. And the search engines make the determination of the crawl size, and it's just a constraint that we as SEOs just need to work with. And again, it's about understanding our flow. So now that we kind of have an idea of how many pages we're getting crawled per day on our site, we can play Googlebot and use deep crawl to run a web crawl. So we can run a crawl of the daily crawl budget to get an idea of what content bots would access on any given day. For a lot of the examples in the presentation, I'm actually going to be using data from the Racine Urban Garden Network site, which is a community garden organization that I'm on the board of. A few slides previous, we saw that this site had a daily crawl budget of 23. So that's what we're going to run. And this site has about 70 pages in the index. So here are the results from our first crawl, and we can see that for this particular crawl, we hit it, and at least 3 levels deep here, and there's apparently 36 pages in those 3 levels. And for the most part, it looks pretty good. There's a couple of concerns I have around load time, and it looks like we've got a 404 link, but overall, it's a few easy things for us to fix, not a terrible experience for a bot. What I'm going to do is run this crawl again, but start from, not from the home page, but from the most popular entry page on the site, which is our garden plot sign-up page. And here, looking at these reports side by side, we can see that bots take a different path depending on the entry page. This site is small, so they aren't drastically different, but you can imagine how that complexity really scales up on a large site. And it's probably not financially feasible, not to mention it's very time consuming to run a really big crawl of like 500,000 plus URLs from several different start points. But it's worthwhile to do at least one full crawl budget crawl for a baseline, and then again after a major change or feature enhancement to see how the flow has or hasn't changed. And one of my favorite things about Deep Crawl is that the reports are saved online, so it's really easy to compare them to each other, and I really love that feature. So some additional considerations as you consider, or as you continue your analysis of your crawl budget, and you're looking at that data from the Deep Crawl results. Are your strategically important pages easy for bots to get to? 1. 2, what happens when bots arrive on these pages? Where do they head next? And how many levels deep can bots typically crawl on a given day? Which is important if your really important pages are several levels deep. And what can you do to give your strategically important pages better crawl access and visibility? So now that we've identified pages that are important to us, how many are indexed, how many can be indexed per day, let's talk a little bit about sitemaps. And I have one word about sitemaps, well 2, intentional indexation. And sitemaps are intentional. The intent is to inform the search engines what content you consider most important to your site so that you can kind of help nudge the flow in favor of those pages. Now, sitemaps are generated. Oftentimes you'll see something in the sitemap index file like typically sitemap01.xml, sitemap02.xml, etc. But who really has the time to comb through tens of thousands of URLs to figure out what all is in sitemap 01? I mean, I don't have that kind of time. But it is still really important to know what's in them because, again, sitemaps are intentional. So one thing you can do is organize sitemaps by template. And this is helpful even if your site is quite small. First of all, you can quickly eyeball them to see if there's any problems with them, to see how many pages of that particular template are indexed. And second, if there's an issue in one sitemap, either with the crawls in the URL, like either with the syntax of the sitemap or with the actual like URL, the page itself, it doesn't impact the other sitemaps. And if there are issues, you can crawl the index and determine if they are still a problem, what kind of problem it is, and again, determine if it's syntax or if it's with the website. So here I'm going to run the Rugen sitemaps, and we're going to look at the results. So here in the results, I see 2 non-200 status codes. It looks like they're 500 errors. These are actually the same ones that Google was reporting up here in that category sitemap. And to inspect those, like can inspect those further. I can either rectify the situation with the web page if that's the problem, or I can just remove them from the sitemap entirely. And then also there's one duplicate page here, and that will need to be removed from one of the sitemaps so you don't have duplicate URLs in your sitemaps. So basically we want to tell the bots that our intentions are good and we don't want to waste their time and their bandwidth or our bandwidth on crawling things that are broken and not relevant. So crawling our own sitemaps helps us understand if any errors within them are ruining our flow. The other thing we can use deep crawl for is to make sitemaps. So let's say we decided that we wanted to monitor the pages specific to the gardens because those are strategically important to us. We could use deep crawl to create a sitemap for this page cohort by generating an XML sitemap report like right out of deep crawl. And then we can rename it something like garden location sitemap.xml and add it to the index file. And then just making sure that if these URLs are in other sitemaps that they've been removed from those sitemaps. Okay, so we've identified pages, we've measured indexation, we've determined our crawl budget, and we've communicated with the search engines what our intent is. But there are still a few more potential impacts to our flow. And those are crawl errors, my favorite thing. So customer-facing website errors create a poor user experience, obviously, and even non-customer-facing crawl errors can erode our domain's authority over time. So search engines want to send traffic to reliable sites because that's best for their business. So if you have a lot of crawl errors on the site, it really causes problems for that, and it will impact your rankings. It really will. But helpfully, search engines do list out crawl errors in the Search Console, or in the case of Bing, in the Webmaster Tools, you can find all the crawl errors in there as well. So step one is to figure out where the crawl errors are coming from. Sometimes looking at the error details is very helpful, and it's obvious why it's occurring. In the case of this particular page, it was a URL that was not 301 when the new site went live for whatever reason, and I can either figure out where it needs to go and 301 it, or I can force it to 410 and let the bots know that it's gone. So this is a pretty easy fix. For this error, though, sometimes the details just lead to questions. So this particular URL structure was not part of the old site, and it's not part of the new site. So has the site been compromised in some way? Is there something else going on with it? This is when it's time to perform some what I call SEO CSI, so crime scene investigation, which is probably a topic for a whole other presentation, doing like the deep forensic work to kind of understand an error. And actually that case study that I did was one of the, could definitely fall under the realm of SEO CSI. Another handy tool in doing analysis is, of course, Fetch as Google. Bing also has this functionality, and I'm told that deep crawl does as well, but I haven't actually used it with deep crawl. But if you haven't used any of these tools, it's very helpful to know if the issue is just impacting users and bots or just bots. Sometimes on very complex e-commerce or enterprise level sites, there are like different environments, and bots may see different things than humans do, and it's key to make sure that bots and humans see the same thing. Google likes when bots and humans see the same thing. Otherwise, it's cloaking. So here we're going to fetch and render this supposed 500 error, and right now it's posting a 200 status. It looks the same for bots and for visitors of the website. So in this case, I would just hit that submit to index button and mark it as fixed, and it's done. But this is just like a one-off error. What if it's more systemic, or what if you've hundreds or thousands? How do you test those? How do you know if they've been fixed? So if it's a multiple URL fix, you can use the list crawl feature in Deep Crawl to test lists of URLs to determine if issues persist or if they've been corrected. If they appear like they're fixed, you can then mark multiple files as fixed in the Search Console, and then you can pat yourself on the back because you just helped out your flow. So I'm hoping that you're pretty psyched by now about being able to master your website flow. After all, you're going to leave here and identify pages, measure indexation, determine your crawl budget, communicate important pages to search engines, clear any errors that are blocking your flow. But of course, there's always, 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 always something else. And that is JavaScript, which right now, and only for now, is a Google-specific issue, but you can be sure that the other search engines will soon follow suit. And whenever there's new crawling, there's always new chaos. And bots at this point, Googlebot in particular, well, only Googlebot, is pretty much at my skill level with JavaScript in that they know enough to be really, really dangerous. And JavaScript is an excellent source of crawl creepers, meaning they execute something that appends onto a URL and then it just kind of keeps crawling with that appendage on the URL, and all of a sudden you've got a ton of duplicate content or a bunch of errors like 500s or 404s that are just kind of popping up everywhere. An issue that I dealt with recently on PartsDirect was that there was a JavaScript pop-up that was meant to fire if you needed to recover your password. And one day Googlebot felt very proactive and decided to execute that little piece of code, and it appended a parameter to the URL crawl, and within 2 weeks I had nearly 2 million brand new URLs with this just kind of garbage appendage on it in the index and a whole mess of errors. It took months to get them all de-indexed, and actually I can't say that they're all de-indexed because I still have a few that just won't die. So that is absolutely no fun at all. And what can you do about it? Well, there are a few preventative best practices that you can use for the time being that can help. And one is to always use the full URL path rather than a relative path if there's URLs that are executing in JavaScript. This will help prevent the whole appendage issue. Number two, I was actually able to squash my creeper by adding a rel nofollow attribute in the href. And so that was the way that I was able to get them out of the index. So I consider that kind of a secondary level of defense. Number three is do not block bots from your JavaScript resources. So you want to be able to allow JavaScript to execute because bots don't want it. You don't want it to look like you're cloaking. And then finally, monitor, 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 because what isn't being executed today could be executed tomorrow. Okay, so in a relatively short period of time here, we talked about a lot of stuff, but I'm pretty confident that you're going to leave here knowing your flow because you're going to understand all the parts of your website and how much of each part is indexed. You will have analyzed your crawl budget. You will have audited your sitemaps. You will have analyzed your reported crawl errors. and you're monitoring your site because bots are always innovating. So I'd like to leave you with a quote with many apologies to Thomas Jefferson, which is, "Eternal vigilance is the price of visibility." And may the flow be with you. So I'm going to hand the controls back over to Anna to moderate Q&A. Thank you, Anna.
Thanks, Jacqueline. That was really, really interesting. Right, I'm just going to take back control of the screen. Yes. Put this into presenter. There we are then. So yeah, thanks once again. I'm just going to check now if we have any Q&A. I actually have a question. I know you were talking about your nifty little trick for creating sitemaps using DeepCrawl. Aren't most sitemaps updated dynamically on the server using a script?
Yes. In some cases, yes. I mean, ideally, especially in a large site, most of them are updated dynamically. But that said, you don't have to update all of your sitemaps dynamically. You could, if you know that certain pages are strategic to you and you know that those URLs don't change and you're not adding new content, like adding new URLs, you could very easily kind of carve those out of the dynamic script and then just track those separately as individual sitemaps. So you can have a hybrid situation where some of them are updated automagically and then others you have direct control over.
Okay. So do you periodically perform like a kind of spring clean of your sitemaps, or is that something like, how often would you do that?
I wouldn't say it's a spring cleaning, but every time we have, like we've done a couple here at Sears, we've done a couple really large releases where URLs changed. And so every time I do a URL change, I rerun all the sitemaps to make sure all the redirects are working correctly and that all of the code is kosher. So
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not really a spring cleaning. It's like a release cleaning. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, great. I think we have one extra question. Probably got time for one more. So how do you use the filter options? It's a question specific to DeepCrawl. I might have to take that one offline and just get back to you personally. Someone else has asked, what's the best way of dealing with crawl error URLs that keep reappearing in Search Console for a really old version of the website with no in links?
Oh, that's a tricky one. If those pages are really gone, I would suggest making sure they instead of rendering as 404s, if they're appearing as 404s, having them render as 410s. Like I would work with your dev team to get those to redirect to a 410, not a 404.
Yeah. Okay.
And that should probably just mark them gone and get rid of them if they're stubborn.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, thanks for the question. That was Michelle Race. Thanks very much. Daniel has also asked, as have another number of other people, will the slides be made available to the audience? Yes, we'll be popping them up on the website tomorrow, sometime tomorrow. Just one more question now from Stephanie Lund. With 404s, is it better to do a 301 or 410?
It depends what it is. Like if you have a one-to-one map, you don't want a soft 404 or something like back to the home page. That's not something you want to do. So, but if you know where that URL is supposed to be, then I would say 301 it to that URL. If that URL is not supposed to be anywhere, like it's just gone, then I would 410 it.
Okay, cool. Brilliant. So thanks to Jacqueline again. Thank you so much for this. Really, really interesting. We've got a few extra resources, which I'm going to share with you now. Here we go. So for those of you that haven't seen it, Jacqueline's case study is on the website. The URL is there. We also have a white paper called The Science of Crawl Space. So that will give you a lot more information on crawl budget. We also have a guide to sitemap audits and advanced configuration. And of course, if you want to learn more about DeepCrawl's Customer Advisory Board, which Jacqueline is a member of, then the link is there for you as well. So we'll be popping this webinar, so the sound and the slides, up on the website tomorrow. Thank you to everyone who's joined the webinar today. We're hoping to do them more regularly, so do keep your eyes peeled for the next one, and we'll see you there. Thanks again, Jacqueline.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Cool. All right. See you soon, guys.
Take care.